All right, welcome back, fifth graders. This is Mr. Mace, and I'm here today to go over Unit 5, Lesson 4 with you. Should be on page 217 in your math expressions books. Our learning target for today is still division-based, which is what we've been doing for the last couple of lessons, but we're here today to focus specifically on the remainder, specifically on the number that is left over. And up to this point, we've really just asked you to leave that answer as remainder 10, remainder 12. But I'm here to tell you today, guys, that there are different things that we can do with that remainder, or that remainder can have different meanings depending on, especially story problems, depending on how we are trying to solve this problem. So, today's lesson is simply going to be focusing on when there is a remainder, how do I treat it? What option do I go with? All right, so these first couple of pages and this first video is simply going to be talking us through the options and showing us why, or talking about the why we would leave the remainder or put the remainder into this form. All right, there will be a second video today that will do some practice problems where we'll kind of ask you to figure out what would we do with the remainder in this scenario, what would be the best option. All right. So in some problems, like problem number 1 here, guys, it simply tells us to ignore the remainder. So why would that be the case? What would be a story problem in which we would not need to worry about the remainder? And here is an example of that. It says a roll of ribbon is 1,780 inches long. It takes 1 yard of ribbon, 36 inches, to wrap a gift. How many gifts can be wrapped? And then the last question there says, why would you ignore the remainder? I'm not going to walk us through the entire process. I want to jump right down to this last problem here. It says, why would we ignore the remainder? Well, in this case, guys, we need 36 inches to completely wrap a gift. So if I get done wrapping a whole gift and I've got a number smaller than 36, which is what a remainder would be, that paper is kind of useless in terms of using it for another gift. It's not going to cover the entire package. It's not going to get us to another gift. So in this case, when they say how many gifts can be wrapped, we're looking for how many gifts can be completely covered by the paper, not how many gifts can be partially covered by the paper. So that remainder is just leftover paper. It is paper that is unusable to answer the question that we have been asked in this story problem. Okay, so then in that case, we can just give the answer when I solve this problem. And for your information, it would be 49 gifts. Okay, but there would be a remainder when we are done with that. There would be a remainder, and we would just drop the remainder out of our answer because that extra paper can't cover a full gift. All right, so that's sometimes we might ignore the remainder when the story problem is asking for it. Another type of thing we might do with that remainder, or if we have a remainder in the problem, is we might round up to the next whole number. And this is a very common one that get put on tests like MCAs and things like that, where we are really asking you to wrap your mind around what does that remainder mean. So say we have a group of 247 people who are traveling to a basketball tournament on a bus. Each bus is going to hold 52 people. Well, I can tell you right now again that 52 does not go in evenly to 247. So again, I'm going to bypass the answer for right now and the problem. Okay, I'm just going to jump right down to why would we choose to round up in this scenario. So as I'm packing people onto a bus and we're filling 52 people per bus, I've got a group of students or basketball players or spectators, okay, whoever it is going to this tournament. I've got a group of people who didn't make it on that last full bus. But am I going to leave those people behind and say, sorry, you can't make it? Or am I going to say, hey, I need to get an extra bus? So in this case, okay, we can fill 4 buses, but there are people left over, okay? So we would still need, though, we need a 5th bus that won't be completely full, but we don't want to leave those people behind. Another example that I give my students in the class all the time, if you are hosting a party and you are inviting people over to your house, and you can sit 5 people at a table or 4 people at a table, and you've got 3 people left over, are we just not going to get them a table and expect them to stand or expect them to sit on the floor? No, we're going to get an extra table. Even though that table won't be full, we will need to get another table. So we would have 4 full buses, but we would need the 5th bus to get the remaining people onto that bus. So in one case, we're going to ignore the remainder, and in the second case, we're actually going to have to round that whole number, round that up to the next nearest whole number. That remainder is going to tell us we got people left over. They need to get on a bus too. We do that often with like field trips. When we would go to Buck Hill in 5th grade, very often we would have to get an extra bus because we have students who don't fit on that original bus. All right, now the third option is actually a combination of 2. Okay, it says sometimes you use the remainder to form a fraction. Fractions and decimals are 2 different things, but they basically are getting us to an exact answer. Okay, we don't want to have a remainder of something left over, but we need to break those things up into even groups. Everything needs to be exactly even. So as let me scroll up here just a little bit so we can get it. I can write on this easily. Question 3 says 28 students in Miss Colby's class will share 98 slices of pizza equally. All right, and it says look at the division shown here to explain how we get the fraction after you find the remainder. So as we give people their slices of pizza, okay, it looks like everybody's going to get 3 slices for sure, but we are going to have 14 slices left over. Okay, well, do we treat it unfairly and just hand some people 4 slices of pizza? Do we waste those 14 slices of pizza because we want to treat everybody fairly, so we throw them away? No, we would turn that remainder then into a fraction. Okay, and so everybody would get so many full slices, but then they would also get a partial slice of that remaining 14. And in this case, it works out nice and easily that it would be 3½ slices of pizza. So we'd cut each of those remaining slices in half and hand those out to the 28 people. And here's how we would get to that half. Here's how we turn a remainder into a fraction. Okay, the number that I circled here, 14, becomes our numerator, and the number we divided by becomes the denominator. So it starts out as 14/28. But because we've done fractions already, hopefully we have a pretty good knowledge that 14/28 is not simplest form, and then I can divide both the top and the bottom by quite a few different options. Actually, I could divide both of them by 2. I could divide both of them by 7. But in this case, I could divide both of them by 14. The greatest common factor that both of them have is 14. And if I do that, 14 divided by 14 is 1. 28 divided by 14 is 2. And that's where my half comes from. So I'm using the remainder, putting it on top of my divisor, and creating the fraction so that I can figure out that I'm not going to waste 14 slices of pizza. I'm going to give everybody 3½ slices of pizza. And that's one way to treat that remainder where we can get an exact answer. Okay, in those situations where we need an exact answer, we can turn it into that. We could also turn it into a decimal number. And here's a similar problem. And we most often use decimal numbers when we're dealing with money. So if I'm going to say, hey, we're all working together here, and it's again, here's an example of a money problem. It says, suppose 16 friends earned $348 at a car wash. They want to divide the money equally. The division at the right shows that each friend gets $21. There is $12 left over. Dividing the 12, each friend gets an additional 12/16 or 3/4 of a dollar for a total of $21.75. Now, that again is assuming that you know exactly what that 3/4 of a dollar is. Okay? Sometimes we need to turn that number into a decimal by following a process, and we'll show you that as we progress through with long division with decimals involved. But all we would really need to do is put a decimal point here that would move straight up into our answer and add zeros that we would continually bring down to get that. Okay, they're showing you how to convert that fraction into a decimal, knowing that 3/4 of a dollar. But I don't necessarily know every fractional amount and how that's going to relate to $1. So it works out easily here, but there is a process where you can simply add zeros and bring it down, and you'll find out that if I add a 0 here, 16 goes into 127 times. I'd still have a remainder, bring down another 0. 16 goes into whatever that one is 5 times, and my answer is everybody's going to get $21.75, not just $21, and I'm not just going to hand out the extra dollar bills loosely to everyone. We're going to have to break it up by change, okay? In the next video, I will show you that process of how to turn that into a decimal. I just want to make sure in this video, guys, I get through all the different types of examples, okay? And the last one I want to show you today is that we have another problem here where sometimes the remainder itself is the answer, where we can forget the whole number out front and just simply answer what's left over. And that is the key here for this problem, understanding what the question is asking. The extra bagels are for the workers. So how many bagels will the workers get? Well, they're getting the leftovers. They're getting the things that are left. So if a bagel shop has 138 bagels to be packed into 12 boxes, we're going to pack those boxes with 12 each, 12 each, 12 each, and there's going to be a number left over. Okay, and again, notice I'm not solving these right now. I am simply identifying that there will be bagels left over. What would happen to those remainders? They're going to be handed out to the workers. So in this case, the remainder, whatever is left over, is what the bakers or the workers will get. And in this case, they will get 6 bagels. So if we were to solve this problem, 138 divided by 12, there's going to be a remainder of 6. And my answer isn't how many go in each box or how many boxes we can fill. It's how many extra bagels there will be, which is the leftover amount. Okay? So those are the basic ideas for what can happen with our remainder or how we determine it. So now, as we read these story problems, as we move forward here, guys, with some problems and some examples, our biggest thing isn't necessarily solving the problem. Obviously, that's part of it. We want to solve the problem correctly, but we want to figure out what do we do with the remainder when we have one. And that's going to probably lead us to believe that we are going to have and end up with a lot of remainders as we go through these problems. So I'm going to stop the video right here, and I would ask you or like you to attempt problems 6 and 7. Okay? So you got 2 story problems there. I'd like you to attempt those 2 problems. And more importantly, I want you to think about what are we going to do with the remainder, because we know there will be one, remainder in these problems when we have them. Okay? Is the remainder going to go away? Is we just going to forget it? Are we going to use that remainder to round up to the next whole number? Are we going to turn that remainder into a fraction or a decimal? Are we going to use the remainder as our answer? Those are the 5 major answers, things that we can do with those remainders. All right, so don't start the next video. I will start the next video with the answers to these 2 problems, 6 and 7, and then continue on with a few more example problems for the second video. Good luck, guys, and as always, if you have questions, make sure to ask your teacher.